Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are Critic Group 1 and today we will continue the discussion on Munkar Minal Dalal, also known as Deliverance from Error, written by Imam Al-Ghazali. First of all, we would like to give some credits and comments to presenting group. In their presentation, they gave a good correlation between this case and the story of Prophet Musa and Prophet Khidir. They also provided good reflections that was to ponder upon. In brief, the presentation was compact, neat, and informative. However, we noticed that some of the slides used incorrect in-text citation and the video editing was not smooth as some parts were improperly cut. The slides were also incomprehensive in a way that it cannot be read alone without explanation. We also thought that the key points were a little bit unclear. Overall, it was a good presentation with room for improvements. For our stand, we agree with the presenting group that supports the approaches and efforts done by Imam Al-Ghazali in seeking true knowledge or hakikah. However, we also would like to emphasize on the importance of having excellent adab and attitudes as highlighted by Imam Al-Ghazali for the knowledge seekers. Now, let's peek into the presentation. Today, we have 5 agendas where we will present about the chronology on evolution of knowledge, the importance of seeking knowledge, advantage and disadvantages of the 4 paths towards knowledge, Sufism, and also reflections on this case.
Next, I will present the evolution of knowledge during the era of Al-Ghazali until the present. The timeline begins at the Islamic Golden Age, which is at the year 476 until 1450. This phase will be explained later, followed by the Renaissance era, where the major movements in politics, religion, and geography helped to guide human civilization into modern era. Martin Luther also led the Protestant Reformation and redefined Christianity. And the era of cultural rebirth in art, music, literature, and philosophy. Next, followed by modern era where technological innovations begin and give impact to social, economy, and also politics. The Islamic Golden Age is also known as Europe Dark Age by the Orientalism. This happened during the reign of Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid at Baghdad. Islamic scholars and polymaths from various parts of the world gathered and translate knowledge into Arabic and Persian. In this era, Al-Ghazali stressed the concept of God and his relationship with mankind as the philosophy of education. Education also managed to develop other aspects of human life. Meanwhile, for Westerners, this era is an unstable period that lasted for nearly a millennium. This period shows most power rebuilding after the collapse of the Roman Empire and the beginning of Islam in the Middle East. But later, towards the beginning of Renaissance era, Europeans started to explore and inventing printing press.
Seeking knowledge is a feature of man. Fatarahu, he created it, means in its complete pure form without any ill will and ill intention. Islam is called Din of Fitrah, the religion of human nature, because its laws and its teachings are in full harmony with the normal and the natural inclination of the human fitrah to believe in and submit to the Creator as stated in the Quran, chapter 4, verse 1 to 5. From the first word of revelation of the Quran, Iqra or read, God continues to remind believers that seeking knowledge is the best way to attain success in the world and hereafter. Surah Al-Alaq were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was illiterate or ummi, and the Holy Quran throws light on this matter, and Allah states in Surah Al-Ankabut, verse 48, For years the Prophet was deeply absorbed in the cave of Mount Hira in his search for the truth, and now his mind and soul were ready to stand forth to spread the mission of Allah. Therefore, he was sent with a message from Allah to proclaim in the name of the Lord. The Prophet Muhammad was reported saying, The learned are the successors of prophets. The events from the story of Prophet Sulaiman and Queen Balqis are narrated in the Quran will not escape from bringing the true news even from the naked eye, as if it was a strange event. Queen Balqis finally embraced Islam after going through those moments of excitement. Lessons that can be learned from the story is the reaction of Prophet Sulaiman to being offered gifts. He says, What use are gold and jewels to him when he has been given everything he could want? by believing in God. This might seem strange to those who are not Muslim, but for the devout Muslim, the sincere believer, the gift of Islam is greater than any amount of gold and silver. Second, the response of the Queen to all of this is quite simple. She submits to God and to Islam. Ma'rifatullah, knowing Allah, is a foundation of Islamic teaching because it is a vital part of Muslim faithful. Other teachings of Islam stand on it because without this strong foundation, such as knowing Allah sturdily, perhaps this someone will not do his obligation, or at least what he is doing doesn't have any useful for himself. According to Imam Al-Ghazali, Ma'rifatullah means convincing knowledge. Ma'rifatullah is looking at Allah's face. Of course, it means looking at the visible manifestation of Allah's traits in this universe. Convincing knowledge happens if the object is uncovered clearly without any hesitations. It means revealed of the secrets of divinity and all secrets of His creations. This circumstance cannot be reached by sense of experience and or logical reasoning, but it is purely a gift or divine inspiration from God through Nur, which is given to hearts.
Now, I will explain about the next agenda, which is the advantages and disadvantages of path towards the knowledge, which involve the science of Kalam, Batinites, philosophical sciences, and Sufism. For the sense of Kalam, the advantages are first, ilmu al-Kalam conserve and protect the religious belief from any kind of misconceptions, and second, it helps to strengthening the foundation of religious belief. Ilmu al-Kalam is a science to prove religious belief with truth evident and reject who makes invalid akidah, and to remove doubts and reassure the heart by faith, and is able to respond to suspicions and misconception about akidah and reject of a voluptuary. While the disadvantages of ilmu al-Kalam is first, their studies rely on premise which they took over from their enemy. Either they are being compelled to admit them either by uncritical acceptance or because of the community consensus, or by simple acceptance deriving from the Quran and the traditions or the Sunnah. And second, is they attempt to defend the orthodoxy by the study of the true natures of things. They plunge into the study of substances and accidents and their principle, which is against their aim of science, which is to simply conserve the creed of the orthodox for the orthodox and to guard it from the confusion introduced by the innovators. Now, moving on to the Batinites. Batinites claim that there must be authoritative teaching and an authoritative teacher who must also be infallible or maksum. But as we all know, the only infallible teacher in Islam is the Prophet Muhammad SAW. Although the Prophet is no longer alive, they thought that there must be someone they can refer to as infallible Imam. And Imam Al-Ghazali thought that this idea exists due to their intense fanaticism towards their Imam until they are deceived by the false teaching of their Imam. And this result in them rejecting others' ideas or doctrines of their enemies, and when they are in an argument, there is no substance to their view and no force in their argument. This also included when they are being asked about their Imam designation. They fail to provide evidence of explicit designation of their Imam. For the philosophical sciences, Al-Ghazali did not condemn the philosophical sciences entirely. They attributed to the Greek philosophers, as some are not related directly to the religion. Generally, Al-Ghazali also reminds that accepting their sciences was not necessarily to accept all their arguments, especially about God. This to say that the philosophers are not always right and some of their ideas are not accepted because of contradicting the Islamic teachings, not because of it is philosophical or coming from the philosophers. Imam Al-Ghazali only rejected the science of metaphysics, which discuss on God. There are three problems of philosophy that Imam Al-Ghazali rejected. First, the issue of eternity of the world. For them, that the world and God must have the same attribute whether both are created or uncreated. While the former is impossible, therefore the answer is both are immortal or uncreated. Secondly, they denied God's knowledge of particulars. They thought that God's knowledge is not dependent on time. Therefore, the knowledge of God does not differ either previously, presently, and in the future. Based on this analogy, the philosophers maintain that the knowledge of God is consistent and does not change either. For them, the philosophers, change cannot be attributed to God, for it can undermine the holiness of God. And lastly, the resurrection of the body. The philosopher understanding of resurrection is for the body in the sense that the reward and punishment are to be felt only by the soul or ruh and not the body at all. and it's agreed by the Imam Al-Ghazali, but they also falsely denied the corporal rewards and punishment and blasphemed the revealed law in their stated views. Lastly, for Sufism, Sufism executes both theory of knowledge and the practices. It is their most distinctive characteristic is something that can be attained not by study, but rather by fruitional experience and the state of ecstasy and the exchange of qualities. Secondly, practicing Sufism is the true nature and special character of prophecy, as stated by Imam Al-Ghazali. Just as the intellect is one of man's stages in which he receives an eye by which he sees various species of intelligibles from which the sense are far removed, the prophetic power is an expression signifying a stage in which man receive an eye possessed of a light, and in its light, the unknown and other phenomena not normally perceived by the intellect become visible. The earth for Sufism is one who claimed to be an adept in the science of Sufism and alleged that he had attained a degree beyond the need for formal worship, such as praying, fasting, and giving zakah. And secondly, some may stray from the path of mysticism. As examples stated by Refaat is that among the various groups circumscribed under this category is a group in Baghdad who thought that in renouncing their own qualities, they have entered God's qualities. And secondly, a group in Syria and in Basra who claim to have spiritual vision of God in this world, and these erring liberties lost or restrained in their claim to have attained proximity to God and annihilation in Him.
Now let's discuss a little bit more about Sufism. Many Sufi masters has offered numerous and various definitions of Sufism. When all the definitions are assembled together, it is beautifully expressed as the purifications of the senses and the will, the building up of inner and outer life, and the attainment of eternal felicity and blessedness by apprehending the divine realities. The angle of Sufism is not to acquire intuitive knowledge of reality, but rather to be a servant of God. Sufism believes that there is no stage higher than the stage of servanthood, and there is no truth beyond the Sharia. The other purpose is to produce convictions and to obtain the firm devotion to God. This aspiration can be attained by the experience of fana and baqa. Sufism is one branch of Muslim philosophy, and like other branches, its main sources are the Quran and Hadith. The fundamental principle upheld in Sufism includes Kashaf as the source of knowledge, God is unique, eternal and all-pervading, the world is transitory, and God is near to all of His creations. Sufism requires the seeker of Allah to pass through different stages to become one. There are 4 stages of understanding in Sufism. First is the Sharia, which consists of the teaching of Islam. It provides guidance for us to live properly in this world. Second is Tariqah, which refers to the practices of Sufism. Just as Sharia refers to the external dimensions of religion, Tariqah refers to the inner practices of Sufism. Third is Haqiqah. It refers to the direct experience of the presence of God within. This attainment of Haqiqah confirms and solidifies the practices of the first 2 stages. Fourth is Ma'rifah or Gnosis, which is a superior knowledge of spiritual truth. This is a deep level of inner knowing beyond the Haqiqah. Ma'rifah also refers to an ongoing state of atonement with the God and with the truth.
Foundation of Deen consists of Iman, Islam, and also Ihsan. For Iman, the people of Iman are called as Mu'min. The people of Islam are called as Muslim, while for the people of Ihsan are called as Muhsin. Iman is about the Aqidah, the Etiqad. Islam is about Sharia, or also good taste. And Ihsan, it is the excellent state of spiritual aspect. There are 6 pillars of Iman, while there are 5 pillars of Islam. There are 5 pillars of Islam. The first one is declaration of faith. The second one is obligatory prayer. The third one is zakah, and then followed by fasting in the month of Ramadan, and finally pilgrimage to Mecca. The 6 pillars of Iman, starting from belief in Allah, belief in the Malaika, belief in God's divine books, belief in the prophets, belief in the day of judgment, and finally belief in Qada and Qadar. Relating to this article about the attributes of Imam Al-Ghazali, we have understood the determination of him in seeking knowledge. So, in seeking knowledge, we can also attain a level of Islam
iman, and also ihsan. Specifically, in terms of faith, in terms of belief, there are the context of certainties, doubts, and suspicions. There are three stages, there are three levels of certainty. So the first level is ilmul yaqin, the second level is ainul yaqin, and the third level is haqqul yaqin. So for the first one, it is about placing a level of confidence in our knowledge. When it comes to a knowledge, we cannot just read it and apply it, but we must read it thoroughly and understand it first before believing in something. We cannot do taqlid, such that we cannot blindly believing in something without understanding and studying it first. So that's the first level. And then the second level of certainty, such that we place a level of confidence in our Aini, in our sight. For example, we have the confidence in our observation, in our concentration. And then the second point, such that we place a level of confidence when it comes to something familiar to us, where we come into the scene that we have no doubts, we have no suspicion. And the third one is having the confidence, such as we are saying our God, the Almighty. And then the third level of confidence is haqqul yaqin. This certainty, we have no doubt, we have no suspicions, such that we are confident in our God's, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's strengths and also abilities. So those are the three stages of certainties that we can apply and we can practice in the journey of seeking knowledge.
According to Sahih Bukhari, it is mentioned that al-ihsan is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you can see him, and if you could not achieve this state of this devotion, then take it for granted that Allah sees you. Knowledge can be divided into two types, which are ilmu insani, which is the knowledge that can be achieved via our senses, and ilmu rabbani, which also known as ilmu ihsan. Ilmu ihsan is the knowledge which to transform the callous hearts into remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it could be achieved via the spiritual pathway known as tariqat. To achieve ihsan, one need to achieve two maqams, which are maqam muraqabah and maqam musyahadah. Now, what is maqam muraqabah? It is the feeling of being seen, monitored, and supervised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time. It is defined by Shaykh Ibrahim bin Khawas that muraqabah is the purity of practices, either it is hidden or exposed only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is mentioned in Surah Al-Hadid verse 4 that, and he is with you wherever you are, and Allah of what you do is seeing. In the Hadith Tirmizi, Shaddad ibn Aus reported that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, the wise man is the one who holds himself accountable and performs good deeds to prepare for what comes after the death. The foolish man is one who gives in to his lowly desires and seeks the indulgence from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From this hadith, two characteristics of persons who achieving maqam muraqabah can be deduced, which are the first one, he or she always reflecting themselves before they are being judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while the second characteristic is they always prepare themselves for the life after the death. Alright, so next is maqamu syahada, which means witnessing and seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by looking at themselves and the nature. Let me present to you an analogy to understand this concept. So, Ali is a very clever boy. He passed his SPM with flying colors and got accepted into Oxford University with full scholarship. Now, can we see the clever of Ali? Of course, we cannot see the clever parts, but being clever lead Ali to be accepted into Oxford University. The same things goes to looking at the nature and ourselves. We can see Allah. See here doesn't mean we can see with our eyes, but we know that Allah do exist. In this maqam, everything we can see, we can relate it to Allah, and to achieve ihsan, only Allah who can provide us with the nur, as it is something which can only be achieved via the purified soul. And to have a purified soul, one need to perform the tazkiyatun nafs.
The approach or the methods to get to know Allah based on Sufism perspective is called Ma'rifatullah. So There are two stages in getting to know Allah. The first is Sama'i and the second one is Tawqi. The first stage, which is Sama'i, it is the early stage in getting to know Allah by learning the ilmu tawhid not by ourselves but from a teacher. For example, like what we learn in our primary school, secondary school and university. So these ilmu are learned and taught based on two dalil, which are dalil naqli and akli. So what are dalil naqli and akli? Dalil naqli is the Quranic verse and hadith, while for dalil akli, it is our logical thinking but based on the Quranic verse and hadith. Sama'i is the second stage in getting to know Allah. It requires us to learn about Allah using our heart and ruh with a teacher to guide us. It is done through zikir and tafakkur in uzlah and khalwah, which are done by ourselves by isolation, guided by a teacher. So we use our heart or our qalbu and we learn about Allah through His creation in the sky and the earth. So by using our qalbu, then we can get to know Allah by our heart and not what we heard from other people.
Spiritual intelligence in Islam is derived from Quran and Sunnah, and it is human inner strength that comes from the soul, the heart, the feeling, deep faith, perseverance practice based on the tenets of Allah, and also good characteristics. Okay, first is Domain Ar-Ruh. Domain Ar-Ruh is the internal power emitted by the Spirit of God that cannot be seen by the human senses and is not bound by the dimension or size of materials. So Ar-Ruh is the secret of Allah, and only Allah knows about the nature of the Ar-Ruh. Human can only prove the existence of the spirits in their bodies by looking at themselves. In the hadith of Prophet, he describes the meaning of Ar-Ruh. Ar-Ruh is the spirit with chronology of the creation of man in the womb, starting from the semen until the spirit is blown into the womb. So in summary, Ar-Ruh is the absolute right and the authority of Allah. Humans have been given a very little knowledge about the nature of Ar-Ruh. Domain Al-Qalbu can be divided into two notions, canal heart and also the fine heart, Latifah. So the canal heart is the physical heart-shaped piece of tender meat which has a cavity where blood is flowing, and it is located at the left chest. So while the fine heart, Latifah, is the secret spiritual heart-shaped fine Latifah and nature Rabbaniya and Ruhaniya. This element has the power to make a person has a good or a bad personality. Domain Al-Qalbu can change the existing system of trust in a person to know God and execute the laws of Allah, or vice versa. Domain Al-Nafsu can be divided into two meanings. The first one is Al-Nafsu as the strength or power of anger and desire in mankind, and the next one is Al-Nafsu as secret or soft Al-Latifah. So in simple words, there are two senses of the soul which are ignoble and also noble soul. They have a piece of domain of Al-Nafsu. Allah commands all the believers to always remember Him by zikr Allah. So in short, Domain Al-Nafsu have the ability to make a good and obedient to the laws of Allah, or bad and disobedient to the laws of Allah. Domain Al-Aqal is a source of strength in the imagination to think and reflect on the greatness and power of Allah, thus fostering spiritual intelligence of man. It is also associated with the element to capture all symptoms which look at the real world and think about the fact of outward vision seen by the mind. So human life will be more meaningful if they use the domain of Al-Aqal in managing themselves, their families, communities, and countries centered on the testimony of the truth of Islam. Domain Tawheed, domain faith, is the ability of a person to know God as a creator before obeying the laws of Allah and seek forgiveness from Allah. Belief in Allah is the belief of the Arkanul Iman, such as the existence of matter, the nature and deeds of Allah, conviction of the truth of Prophet, and so on. So in other words, faith is an indicator domain to the spiritual intelligence that is one's ability to declare the power of God and His teachings to implement in their daily lives. Domain worship is the person's ability to carry out all the commands of Allah and live all His band. Worship indicator can also be defined as a practice of religion. So religion is felt by the human as the need of internal pressure through the inner call of nature to admit that they have God blessed with great reverence, hope, fear, and put their trust and ask for help from Him. The last one is domain moral. So domain moral is the ability of a person to behave with good character and leave the despicable behavior. In other words, the domain moral through the domain arrow of the spiritual intelligence can be measured by one's ability to act with good characteristics. So moral and manners describe the state of soul, ruhiyah. Noble and upright character is a manifestation of an intelligent spiritual, but bad manners impact of heart impureness.
Next is reflection, which includes adab of Imam al-Ghazali in seeking knowledge, and also self-reflection, that is reflecting adab in seeking knowledge and the viewpoint of ourselves. Adab of Imam al-Ghazali in seeking knowledge, it includes firstly seeking and learning with sincerity, meaning that all prospect towards attaining knowledge is to include worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by the advice, it states that it emphasized that those who has enough knowledge can apply to that, can implement this advice, which is for the sake of knowledge. But for those who are influenced by the other external factors, would find it difficult to comply to that. The three principles of worship, as according to Imam al-Ghazali from Ihya Ulumuddin, it describe for what it follows what Allah has commanded by staying out from negligence and immorality that can diminish the sincerity, and also by rida with qada and qadar, meaning that by accepting the giving of God in this life and learning with pleasure, patience, and getting closer to Him and seeking the pleasure of Him. Second is willingness to be determined, as emphasized in Al-Walad Ayyuha. So what does it mean by willingness? It is the opposite of being forced. By being forced by the other external factors towards attaining the knowledge itself, like the family influence, for example. And then third is priority in Makrifatullah, that is to know Allah dan Mu'amalah, and then fourth, by learning gradually, by learning every aspect of a subject by taking priority on the logical connection between each study, and then fifth, be respectful to teacher, and sixth, abstaining from heated discussion while learning, which can trigger more confusion rather than understanding of the knowledge itself. And then the self-reflection, which includes copy. The first copy asks by seeking knowledge due to him that science without charity is insane, while charity without science will not succeed, as mentioned by Al-Ghazali, meaning that the prospect of learning is all due to him with sincerity. And K, know the objective of every discipline learns by connecting between each of them, the logical connection by knowing the hakikat of every study objective learn. And then optimistic in every decision taking process. And P, patience in learning. This also includes good mannerism with teacher by only asking a teacher when it is allowed and not rushing for the answers. And E, excel your field of your interest at your best and given the best amount at your possible maximum efforts that you can give into attaining the knowledge for the sake of knowledge itself. And then E, engage in active discussion, that is debate for better solution, not based on your intuition means that triggers Ria, hasad, and they wanted hard and arrogant.
Knowledge from Islamic perspective, God is the absolute source of knowledge. As humans, we are obligated to seek the knowledge in order to have a strong faith on God and be the best of Muslims to achieve God's pleasure. Islamic knowledge can classify into two. First, fardu ain is an individually obligatory. If someone fails to learn, then it's considered not fulfilling one's responsibility and being sinful. Second, a fardu kifayah knowledge is a commonly obligatory. If the knowledge is learned by certain group, then the responsibility has been fulfilled and the other Muslims are free from carrying the sin. If nobody learned the knowledge, all Muslims would be sin. From Quran verse 2, definition of al-wasatiyah is expressed as humatan wasatan, with a refer to the Islamic community having the attribute of a justice, excellence, balance in order to serve Allah truthful in this world and in the hereafter. According to Prof. Muhammad Kamal Hassan, he explained the concept of wasatiyah using a graphical presentation. The concept is grounded from two primary sources of Al-Quran and Sunnah. From the graphic, he premised the concept of wasatiyah into three key values of Islam. First, iman. Second, knowledge. Third, taqwa. To obtain justice, knowledge, and balance and stay away from the mode of excesses and laxity, which is causing unnecessary hardship and burden on oneself and others. The concept of wasatiyah can be learned from the hikayah of Salman al-Faris in extreme worship. Someone's story of rebuking Abu Darda for practicing extreme worship is widely used as a reference. This shows that the worship excess the limit is unacceptable, as the Prophet Muhammad once gave a message: make it easy and don't make it difficult. Islam indeed emphasizes on moderation in our everyday life, in which Muslims can worship to Allah SWT and doing their very best for Muslims. But at the same time, they do not disregard others' responsibilities. Wasajah also cabinet from Al-Ghazali books on deliverance from error. He stated that Islamic society can stay away from error only by adopting an attitude of prudence and balance in all good things in religion, because all good things in religion, if practiced to the extent and if applied without moderation, can be violent sources of heresy and errors.
In conclusion, we agree with the approaches and attitudes of Imam Al-Ghazali in seeking knowledge. However, proper adab such as recommended by Imam Al-Ghazali must also be practiced. We have to seek for true knowledge as it will protect us from misguidance. Islam has also encouraged us to seek knowledge as true knowledge will bring us closer to Allah. To end this presentation, we would like to share with you a saying by Imam Al-Ghazali where he said that knowledge exists potentially in human soul like seed in the soil, and by learning, the potential becomes actual.